Back in the day, the PlayStation 2 was a beast of a console, but even it had its limits, or so we thought. The PS2 had some amazing games, but these open world ones were on another level. Big maps, lots of things to do, and freedom you didn't expect on a console that old. Here are the top 20 PS2 open world games that really pushed the system. Scarface, The World Is Yours. Scarface was a big deal because it really tried to push the PS2 to its absolute limit, especially with its world. The game was set in a huge version of Miami, a much bigger city than you'd usually see on a console back then. It wasn't just a few streets, it had all these different neighborhoods, from the beaches of South Beach to the grimy streets of downtown, and they all felt distinct. Driving through the city, you could see just how much stuff they packed in, from cars to pedestrians, which made it feel really alive. The sheer scale of it was a major technical achievement for the PS2. The gameplay was what really set it apart. You aren't just running around and shooting. The whole game was built around the idea of building your empire back up. You started with almost nothing and had to earn money by doing all sorts of shady deals, like buying and selling drugs. The balls meter was a genius feature. The more crazy stuff you did, like taking down enemies in style or just causing chaos, the more your balls meter would fill up. When it was full, you could go into this blind rage mode, which was like a first-person shooter mode where you were invincible and had unlimited ammo. It was a really creative way to reward aggressive and stylish play. Beyond just the shooting, the game had a lot of other layers. You had to buy fronts for your drug business, manage your reputation with gangs and the police, and even launder your dirty money. This wasn't just a basic action game. It had these management elements that made you feel like you were really running a criminal enterprise. You had to go to a bank to clean your cash, and the more you laundered at once, the bigger the percentage the banker would take, which was a neat little detail. It all added up to a really deep experience that made the world feel like more than just a place to mess around in. It felt like a living, breathing place with its own economy and rules you had to learn. For the PS2, with its limited memory and power, creating an open world with that much detail and so many systems working together was a massive accomplishment. GTA San Andreas.
Oh shit, here we go again.
Okay, so now we're talking about the king of them all, Grand Theft Auto San Andreas. I mean guys, what can I even say? Almost all of us must have played this masterpiece at least once. This game didn't just push the PS2's limits, it practically shattered them, and then rebuilt them into something brand new. This wasn't just like a small island city, but it was an entire state. You had 3 whole cities to explore, each with its own style, plus all the countryside in between. There was Los Santos, which was like a mini Los Angeles, then San Fierro, which was based on San Francisco, and finally Las Venturas, which was the game's version of Las Vegas. All of them were massive and connected by highways, country roads, and even deserts. Just the sheer size of the map was mind-blowing for a PS2 game. The world itself felt incredibly alive and so packed with stuff to do. You weren't just a character, you were a person. You had to eat to keep your health up, and if you ate too much junk food, you'd get fat, which would actually change how you looked and how fast you could run. If you worked out at the gym, you'd get ripped and stronger. This was a crazy level of detail for a game back then. You could customize CJ's clothes, his hairstyle, and even get tattoos. It made you feel like you were really shaping your character.
Moms would be proud.
The gameplay was on another level too. The number of vehicles was insane. Bikes, cars, planes, helicopters, and even a jetpack. The missions were wild and varied, from stealing a jet from a military base to robbing a casino. But it wasn't just the story missions. There were so many side activities. You could play basketball, get a girlfriend, play pool, or even just drive a taxi or a fire truck. It felt like a true sandbox where you could just mess around for hours and still find new things to do. The whole game was a technical marvel for the PS2. They had to put so much on that little disc, and it ran pretty well most of the time. The draw distance was incredible for a PS2 game, letting you see so far across the map. It's the kind of game that proved the PS2 was capable of truly epic open-world experiences that were more than just a big map with a few things on it. It was a complete world in a box. Bully. Like, when you think of open world games on the PS2, you're usually thinking about something huge, sprawling, like GTA or whatever. But Bully? Nah, it's so different, and that's why it's so good. It's like they said, what if we took all that open world magic and crammed it into a school? And it just works, it really does. I'm telling you, Bulworth Academy is just one of those places that feels lived in, you know? Like you're actually there. You walk down the halls and you see all the different cliques, the jocks being jocks, the nerds hiding in the library, and the preppies just being total jerks. And the town too, it's just this perfect little slice of Americana with its own weird little spots and secrets. For a PS2 game, the level of detail is just nuts. It's not just a backdrop, it's like a character in the game itself. And the gameplay? Well, the gameplay is where it's at. You're not some tough guy with a machine gun. You're a kid, Jimmy Hopkins, and your weapons are like a slingshot, a bag of marbles, and some stink bombs. It's hilarious. The way you get into fights and pull off pranks, it's just so much more satisfying. And I just love that you have to go to classes. Like, how brilliant is that? Every class is a mini game, right? So you're not just running around, you're actually doing stuff, like solving puzzles in chemistry or trying to put a skeleton together in biology. It breaks up the action and makes the world feel so much more believable. Honestly, the whole thing is just a masterpiece of design. The social system, where you have to gain respect from different groups and get to the top of the food chain, it's so clever. You could get into mischief and get sent to detention, or you could ride your bike all over town just causing trouble. It had so many layers and so much personality, and for me, that's what made it truly special. It wasn't just another open world game, it was this weird, wonderful, and totally unique experience. They really pulled a rabbit out of a hat with this one, and it's easily one of the most memorable PS2 games ever. The Warriors. This isn't just a licensed game that got lucky. It's a labor of love that feels like it was made by people who absolutely adored the movie. It's so much more than just a brawler. It's an entire experience, and a perfect example of what the PS2 was capable of when a studio really cared. So the first thing that gets you is the world. It's this incredibly moody, dangerous version of New York City, and they absolutely nail the vibe of the movie. Like, every single street feels like a place you shouldn't be. The whole city is divided into these territories, right? You've got the Turnbull AC's territory, the Baseball Fury section, and each one feels totally different. It's not a sprawling GTA-style sandbox where you just drive for miles and miles. Instead, it's a more focused, tight, and dense world that just feels so incredibly alive and hostile. The open world element is more about exploring these specific, dangerous blocks and finding all the secrets hidden in them, like stashed spray paint cans or muggable civilians. And the gameplay, dude? The gameplay. It's pure, unadulterated street brawling at its finest. The fighting is just so visceral. You're not just button mashing, you're doing these sweet combo moves, and the animations are so gritty and impactful. You can use so much of the environment to your advantage. I'm talking about smashing a guy's head against a car, throwing him through a storefront window, or using a baseball bat on some poor schmuck. But the real magic is how you fight with your crew. You can tell your guys what to do, like, come on, let's go, and they'll get your back. You can even do these awesome two-man team-up moves where you and a buddy just absolutely destroy some poor dude. That sense of teamwork, of having your brothers in arms watching your back, it's what makes the game so special. And the little details, man, they're everywhere. You can mug people for cash, and you can just destroy stuff to train your moves and get stronger. The side missions are all stuff that feels super authentic to the movie, like tagging your crew's name over another gang's tag. It's the kind of game that really pulls you into its universe and makes you believe you're part of this iconic story. They somehow managed to take a 2-hour movie and turn it into this massive, epic game that perfectly captured every ounce of that film's soul. It's just a phenomenal open-world beat-em-up that belongs on any list of PS2 greats. It's a true benchmark for how to do a movie tie-in game right. Midnight Club 3. Most racing games back then just gave you a track, maybe a few of them. But this gave you 3 huge, living cities to just tear up. You start out in San Diego, which just had this awesome beach vibe and cool curvy roads, and you could just drive for what felt like forever, going all over the place. But then you get to Atlanta, and it's a completely different feel. All these huge highways and big city streets. And then there's Detroit, which had this gritty industrial look that was perfect for street racing. It was insane that they squeezed all that detail into one game. The cities felt so alive, with tons of traffic and little shortcuts and alleys to discover. It was a whole playground to mess around in. But here's the thing, the cars were the main event. This game was all about turning your ride into a work of art. The customization was just on another level. You could change every little piece of your car, from the body kit to the spoilers, the rims, the paint, and even the interior. I remember spending so much time just in the garage, messing with the vinyls and trying to get the paint to shine just right. It felt personal. You were racing a car you actually built yourself, and that made every win feel that much better. They had a ton of variety too. You could go for a fast import, a classic American muscle car, a big truck, or even a motorcycle. And the racing itself was just pure arcade fun. The best part? You didn't just pick a race from a menu. You'd be driving around and see another car you wanted to challenge. So you'd just flash your lights at them to start a race. Then it was a mad dash through the city to the finish line. You had to find your own route and know the shortcuts. Every car class had its own special ability too, like Zone, which would slow down time so you could get a perfect corner, or Aggro, which let you ram through traffic without slowing down. It was a chaotic and really fun way to race. Honestly, this game really pushed the PS2's hardware. The draw distance was incredible for a game that was moving so fast, and everything felt so smooth. It's one of those games that just perfectly captured the street racing culture of the time, and is definitely one of the greatest arcade racers ever made. True Crime Streets of LA. Streets of LA was a big, ambitious game for the PS2. It came out at a time when everyone was trying to make their own version of a big open-world game, but this one tried to do something totally different. Instead of being a criminal, you were the law. You played as Nick Kang, this wild detective, and your job was to clean up the streets of Los Angeles. Here's the thing, the city in this game was huge. The developers said it was a 1-to-1 scale of a big chunk of LA, which was just crazy to think about for a PS2 game. You could drive for ages and see all these real-world places and landmarks, from the streets of Hollywood to the mansions in Beverly Hills. The world felt vast and packed with stuff. The best part was just driving around and seeing the sheer scale of the city. For the PS2, making a world that big and not having it feel empty was a huge challenge, and they did a pretty good job.
Crime alert, all units. Vicious car reported.
The whole game was built around a morality system. As a cop, you had choices to make, and those choices affected whether you were a good cop or a bad cop. When you got a call about a crime, you could rush in and just start shooting, or you could try to be smart about it, disable a car, and then arrest the suspects. Your integrity meter would go up or down based on your decisions. Being a good cop meant more accurate shooting, and being a bad cop gave you more power in a fight. You could even take bribes from people or just rough them up to get information. It was a really unique idea that made the game feel more personal. The gameplay was a mix of a bunch of different things. There was of course a lot of driving, with crazy car chases through city traffic, but when you got out of the car, you had a lot of options. The hand-to-hand combat was a highlight. You could do all these different martial arts moves and combos, which felt really cool and fluid. The shooting was a bit rough sometimes, but it had a cool slow motion feature that let you aim at different body parts, which was just like something out of a movie. On top of the main story, you'd get random calls about crimes you could solve, like a mugging or a bank robbery. It really made the city feel like a living place with stuff happening all the time, not just when you were on a mission. It was an ambitious game that tried to do everything, and it showed how much potential the open world genre had on the PS2.
Hey, those cups look good on you.
Driver Parallel Lines. Parallel Lines brought something truly unique to the PS2's open world scene by giving players two distinct time periods to explore. The game starts in 1978, where you play as a young getaway driver known only as the Kid. The city of New York is a grimy, vibrant place full of classic muscle cars, groovy music, and a specific gritty feel. After a betrayal, the story fast forwards to 2006, and you're back in the same city, but it's completely changed. The vehicles are now modern, the music is different, and the city itself has a polished, more contemporary look. This contrast between the two eras was a huge part of the game's appeal. But again, I mean, the coolest part, without a doubt, is what happens later. The story fast forwards all the way to 2006, and you're still the same character, but now the city is completely different. All the old cars are gone, everything is new, the music has changed, and the whole atmosphere is just slicker and more modern. It was like getting a sequel inside the same game. I remember just driving around and seeing the same streets but with different buildings, different people, and just thinking how wild that was for a game back then. It really felt like the passage of time had happened. And the gameplay for me was all about the cars. The driving in this game was just top-notch. It was so much fun to just tear through the streets in those classic muscle cars from the 70s and then hop into a sleek sports car in the 2000s. And they finally let you get out of the car and get in a new one whenever you wanted, which was a huge deal for a driver game. It felt so freeing. The story was a blast and the missions were a ton of fun, but honestly, I spent so much time just driving around, soaking in the two different eras, and customizing my rides. It's one of those games that just stands out because it had a killer idea and it executed it perfectly. It's just a classic for sure. The Godfather. The Godfather game was a whole different animal when it came out. It wasn't just another open world game, it was this deep dive into the world of the most famous mob movie of all time, and for the PS2, it pulled it off. The game gives you a version of 1940s New York that just feels right. It's got that dark, gritty feel from the film, but you get to explore it all. You can walk the streets, see the classic cars, and even visit places from the movie. The city itself is huge for a PS2 game, and it really felt like a living, breathing place, not just a backdrop for missions. But the best part of the whole thing was how it put you right into the Corleone family. You created your own character and got to rise through the ranks, starting as a small-time thug and working your way up to a powerful made man. The game actually put your character into the spaces between the scenes of the movie, so you'd see famous moments from a whole new point of view, which was just so cool for fans of the film.
It's been too long since you've come around.
The gameplay itself was what made it feel so different from other games. It was all about building your own criminal empire, but the way you did it was unique. They had this system called the Black Hand Combat System, and it was genius. You'd go into a business you wanted to extort for protection money, and you'd have to intimidate the owner. You could do it in all these different ways, like smashing up their shop, throwing them around, or even just talking to them until they broke. You had to get them to their limit without going too far and killing them, which took some real finesse. You would take over these businesses, and then you'd have to take on entire rival family compounds. It was a constant war to expand your turf and your influence. Every mission you did and every business you took over earned you respect, which was like your experience points. The more respect you got, the stronger your character became. You could learn new fighting moves, get better weapons, and become more powerful. The game also tracked your relationships with the other families, so your actions could lead to open warfare or a peaceful truce. It was a really complex system that gave you a lot of freedom in how you chose to play. The game just had a ton of depth and managed to be both a great open world game and a perfect companion to a classic film. It was a true jam on the PS2. Mafia, the City of Lost Heaven. The first thing you have to get is that this game was not GTA. Not at all. It didn't care about being a wild sandbox. It cared about one thing: telling a killer story in an incredible, realistic world. The City of Lost Heaven felt like a real place, plucked right out of 1930s America. The developers put so much work into the details, from the Art Deco architecture to the clothes people wore and the jazz music that played on the radio. Just driving through the city was an experience in itself. The cars were big, heavy, scary and a pain to handle, just like they were back then. You felt every gear shift and every corner was a challenge. And the police system? It was famous for being so strict. You couldn't just speed or run a red light without them getting on your tail, which added a whole layer of tension and made the world feel grounded and real. The story itself was just phenomenal. It's told as a flashback, with your character Tommy Angelo, a former taxi driver, telling a detective his life story. You got to live his entire career, from his first few jobs to his rise as a respected made man, and then the fallout that comes with it all. The characters were so well written and the voice acting was top notch. It truly felt like you were a character in a movie like The Godfather or Goodfellas. The missions were cinematic and tied directly to the plot. You weren't just picking up random side quests, you were living a story. The combat was also way more realistic than other games. It was methodical, and you had to use cover and think about every shot because ammo was limited and you couldn't just run and gun. That realism from the driving to the gunfights is what made the game so special. It was a game that used its open world to build an incredibly immersive and powerful narrative, and it's one of the best examples of a story-driven open world game on the PS2, hands down. The Getaway. The Getaway was a true original for the PlayStation 2. While most open-world games were set in a fictional version of an American city, this game made the bold choice to recreate a massive and highly detailed version of London. The developers went to incredible lengths to achieve a sense of realism, using thousands of photographs and maps to get the city's scale and layout right. Driving through London with its narrow streets and distinctive architecture provided a completely different experience from other games. The atmosphere felt dark and gritty, capturing the mood of a British gangster film. It was a huge technical achievement for the console to render a city this size with such a high level of detail. The game's most talked about feature was its strict dedication to a cinematic experience. It famously had no heads-up display, HUD. There was no health bar, no ammo counter, and no minimap. Instead, health was indicated by how much your character was limping and bleeding, and the direction to your next objective was shown by your car's turn signals. This design choice was a risky but effective way to pull players into the game's world and remove any barriers to immersion. The story itself was presented like a serious, mature crime thriller with a non-linear narrative that swapped between two different protagonists. The missions were structured like set-piece action scenes from a movie, flowing from one to the other with minimal interruptions for free roaming. The commitment to realism extended to the gameplay as well. The vehicles had a heavy, realistic feel, and the controls were more deliberate than the arcade-style driving of other games. This made high-speed pursuits feel more challenging and dangerous. While the on-foot controls could be a bit clunky, they were part of the game's reputation for being uncompromising in its design. The game's use of a cast of real British actors to provide the voice acting also added to its film-like quality. The Getaway wasn't a perfect game, and its dedication to a rigid, movie-like experience meant it lacked some of the freedom of other open-world titles, but its ambition and unique style made it a landmark title that truly pushed the boundaries of what was possible on the PlayStation 2. Spider-Man 3. This game was a different kind of open-world experience for the PS2. Instead of driving around in a car, this was all about being up in the air, swinging from building to building. The game gave you this huge, detailed version of New York City, and for a Spider-Man fan, it was a dream. The city was a character in itself, full of different districts that felt unique, from the bustling streets of Times Square to the quiet buildings of Central Park. They really made it so you could swing anywhere you wanted, and that feeling of freedom was what made the game so special. The traversal was just incredible. The web swinging felt so much better than in previous Spider-Man games. It was all physics-based, so you actually had to attach your web to a building to swing. The speed and the flow of it when you got it right was just so satisfying. You could just spend hours swinging around the city, doing nothing, and it was a blast. And of course, the combat was a huge part of it. You had all these different moves and combos to take down bad guys, but the coolest part was definitely the symbiote suit. When you put on the black suit, your combat became way more aggressive and powerful. It just felt so good to absolutely wreck a group of enemies with the black suit's powers. It was a direct connection to the movie's story and a great gameplay mechanic. The game did a good job of following the movie's plot, but it also added a ton of its own stuff. There were a bunch of different side missions and random crimes you could stop while swinging around, and a bunch of different gangs that you had to deal with. So even if you knew the movie story by heart, there was still a lot to do. Now, the game had its problems, for sure. It wasn't perfect, and some of the on-foot combat could feel a little clunky. But for a PS2 game, the sheer scale of the city and how much fun it was just to swing through it made it a must-play. It was a huge leap forward for superhero games and a great way to just live out the fantasy of being Spider-Man. It's one of those games you just have to appreciate for how much it did with the hardware. Hulk Ultimate Destruction. Ultimate Destruction was a game that understood its assignment completely. It wasn't about realism or subtlety, it was about giving players the ultimate fantasy of being the Incredible Hulk. The game's open world, a sprawling desert canyon and a large city, wasn't the biggest on the PS2, but it was arguably the most fun to play in. The entire environment was designed to be your weapon. Almost everything you saw, from cars and streetlights to tanks and even whole buildings, could be picked up, thrown, and smashed to pieces. The sheer scale of the destruction you could cause was a technical marvel for the console, and it made the city feel less like a place and more like a playground for a superpowered rampage. The gameplay was the real star of the show. The combat was fast, fluid, and completely over the top. You had a massive library of moves, from simple punches that sent enemies flying to devastating ground pounds that could crack the pavement. You could grab two cars and use them as boxing gloves, or clap your hands together to create a massive sonic shockwave. But what truly set the game apart was the traversal. There was no boring running. The Hulk could leap huge distances in a single bound, run straight up the side of a skyscraper, and perform a variety of acrobatic feats that made getting around the city a pure joy. This combination of powerful movement and insane combat made you feel truly unstoppable. The game's creators clearly had a deep understanding of the character. The core of the gameplay was built around the rage meter, which filled up as you took damage and dealt it out. Once it was full, you could perform some of the most ridiculous and destructive moves in the game, which perfectly captured the Hulk's explosive temper. The game was also full of fun missions, boss fights against other powerful characters, and a progression system that let you unlock new, even more ridiculous abilities. While some might argue the world wasn't as large as other open world games, its focus on making every inch of it a destructive playground cemented its place as a classic. It was a game that lived up to its name and proved that sometimes less world and more mayhem is a good thing. Mercenaries, Playground of Destruction. Mercenaries Playground of Destruction was a game that lived up to its name completely. It was one of the purest open-world sandboxes on the PlayStation 2. The game didn't have a rigid, cinematic story like some others. Instead, it gave you a massive map based on a fictional North Korea and let you loose. The entire world felt like a living, breathing war zone with different factions fighting each other. You would see firefights break out between rival groups, and you could choose to get involved or just watch the chaos. The world was designed to be your tool, and the game's philosophy was simple. Give the player a ton of toys and let them figure out how to have fun. The core of the game was its open-ended mission structure. You, as one of a few playable mercenaries, could choose to work for any of the 4 major factions on the map. Taking on a mission for one faction would raise your reputation with them, but lower it with their enemies. This created a dynamic system of alliances and betrayals, and it made every choice feel like it had a consequence. The main objective was to take out a list of high-value targets known as the Deck of 52. You could approach each target in any way you wanted. You could sneak in, go in with a full frontal assault, or even call in a massive airstrike. The game put all the power in your hands and let you be as creative and destructive as you wanted to be. This freedom was made possible by the incredible arsenal at your disposal. You had a massive variety of weapons and, more importantly, a huge selection of vehicles and support options. You could hijack anything you saw, from a simple jeep to a heavy tank or even a helicopter. But the most satisfying part was calling in support. You could bring in everything from a simple supply drop to a massive artillery barrage or even a devastating bunker buster. The game's engine handled the immense amount of on-screen chaos beautifully, with destructible buildings and explosive physics that made every single action feel impactful. Mercenaries was a technical marvel for the PS2 and a testament to how fun a game can be when it gives the player complete freedom and a massive amount of destructive power.
Get your ship and get out of
Destroy All Humans 2. This game for me was just so much more than the first one. The original was awesome, yeah, but it was kind of a small town thing. This one felt like a full-on global invasion. The fact that you got to go to these huge, distinct open worlds, like a parody of Swinging London and a spy movie version of Tokyo, was just mind-blowing on the PS2. They didn't just give you a bigger map, they gave you a whole world with different feels and a ton of different people to mess with. The atmosphere in each city was just so well done, and it felt like you were actually visiting these different places. It was a technical feat for sure, but what really mattered was how fun it was to play in them. And the weapons, oh my gosh, the weapons were just a blast. They gave Crypto so many new tools to play with, and they were all just so ridiculous and awesome. The dislocator gun was my favorite. You'd fire it at a car or a person, and they would just start bouncing around the map like a pinball, causing pure chaos. It was just so satisfying to watch. And the meteor strike, that was just pure over-the-top destruction you could call in from the sky. On top of that, your psychic powers got way better too. You could snatch someone's body to walk around in and even use their powers for your own twisted purposes. All these new toys gave you so many more creative ways to complete missions or, just cause mayhem. Honestly, the best part for me was the co-op. You and a friend could just team up and absolutely wreck a city together, either on foot or in the saucer, and it was just pure, unadulterated fun. It's so rare to have an open world game like that where you can just jump in with a buddy and cause some destruction. The game's humor was also a huge part of its personality. The satire of the 60s, the spy movies, all of it just made the game a joy to play from start to finish. It wasn't just a fun sandbox, it was a funny, charming, and genuinely great game that improved on the original in every single way, and it's a total classic on the PS2. Just Cause. Just Cause was all about one thing, pure, unadulterated freedom and chaos. It came out pretty late in the PS2's life cycle, and it was a total technical show-off. The biggest thing about it was the size of the world. I mean, they claimed it was over 1,000 square kilometers, and when you were playing it, it really felt that big. It was this massive, sprawling tropical paradise with all these different islands, jungles, and small villages. And the best part was that there were almost no loading screens. You could just fly from one end of the map to the other without stopping, and for the PS2, that was just mind-blowing. It really felt like a massive, seamless world to play in. But the gameplay, that's where the magic was. The game gave you two of the most fun traversal tools in any open-world game ever, the grappling hook and the parachute. You could grapple onto anything and everything and just launch yourself into the air, and then pop your parachute and glide wherever you wanted. The whole game was built around these two tools. You could use them to hijack helicopters, pull off crazy stunts, or just get from one place to another in the most insane way possible. And all of that led to Chaos, which was the name of the game. The more destruction you caused and the more missions you completed, the higher your Chaos rating would go, which in turn unlocked more missions for you. It was this awesome feedback loop of just blowing stuff up and getting to blow up more stuff. The missions were a blast too. They were like something out of a classic action movie, full of explosions, car chases, and over-the-top stunts. And the vehicles, the variety of cars, boats, and especially planes and helicopters you could steal was just insane. The game had some rough edges for sure. The frame rate could get a little dicey when there was a ton of stuff going on, and the world could feel a little empty at times because of how big it was. But honestly, it didn't matter. The game was a proof of concept for a new kind of open world experience, and it gave you a level of freedom and creativity that no other game on the PS2 had. It was a chaotic, unforgettable ride and a true glimpse into the future of sandbox games. Gun 2005. This game was so much more than a simple Western shooter. It was this dark, gritty, and incredibly atmospheric experience that, for me, felt like it was pulling you into a proper movie. It wasn't about having a massive, empty world. Instead, it gave you a frontier that, while not as big as some others, was packed with detail and felt truly alive. You could ride for miles across dusty plains, through narrow, treacherous canyons, and into bustling, grimy towns, and it all felt authentic and dangerous. The whole tone of the game was so mature and unforgiving, which was a huge part of its appeal. The story was at the center of it all. It kicks off with a betrayal so sudden and brutal that you immediately feel for the main character, Colton White. His quest for revenge isn't just a simple goal, it's a driving force that carries the entire game. The narrative is so well paced, with twists and turns that kept you on the edge of your seat, and it deals with some heavy themes of greed, corruption, and the violent realities of the Old West. The voice acting was a huge part of this. The cast was filled with big names like Thomas Jane as Colton and Ron Perlman as the villainous Hoodoo Brown, and their performances were just phenomenal. You could feel the grit and the hate in their voices, which made the story feel so much more personal and intense. And the gameplay, man? The gameplay was just so satisfying. The shooting was tight and the weapons felt powerful. You had all the classics, from a quick-firing revolver to a powerful shotgun that could turn enemies into a mist of blood and dust. But the best part, hands down, was the quick draw mechanic. You'd build up your meter by getting kills, and then you could activate this awesome slow motion mode where you would go into a first-person perspective and you could just flick your aim and blast a dozen enemies in the head in a matter of seconds. It was this perfect mix of skill and cinematic flair that never got old. Outside of the main missions, the world was full of stuff to do that felt like it belonged. You could herd cattle, track down bounties, play poker for money, or just go hunting for buffalo. These side activities weren't just filler, they were fun, and they helped you earn cash to buy upgrades for your weapons and improve your stats. And the horseback riding, it wasn't just a way to get around, it was a huge part of the gameplay, allowing you to ride at full speed, jump obstacles, and even shoot enemies from your horse. All of these details, from the excellent voice acting to the brutal combat and the amazing atmosphere, came together to make a game that, for me, was a masterpiece that showed a focused open world experience can be way better than a huge empty one. Okami. This game was just an absolute masterpiece. It wasn't an open world game about crime or violence, it was a straight up work of art and a beautiful adventure. The very first thing that hits you is the art style. The entire world, from the characters to the environment, is done in this stunning Japanese watercolor style. It's like a living painting. When you're playing, it's not just a game, it's a visual feast. And the fact that they pulled that off on the PS2 with its limited hardware is just insane. The game starts in this bleak, colorless world that has been corrupted, and as you play, you literally bring color and life back to the world. And watching the grass and trees grow and the sky turn blue felt so incredibly satisfying. It's a game that makes you feel good just by existing in its world. But the gameplay, dude, the gameplay was just so unique and innovative. The core mechanic was the celestial brush. You could freeze the action at any time and use your analog stick to draw on the screen. You could draw a sun to turn it to daytime, a cherry blossom blossom to make a tree bloom, or a line to slice through enemies or solve a puzzle. The way they integrated this drawing mechanic into everything, from combat to puzzles to just bringing life back to the world, was pure genius. It was so much fun and so satisfying to use that it never got old. You played as the sun god Amaterasu in the form of a wolf, and as you went on your journey to restore the world, you'd get new brush techniques and new powers. The combat was a perfect blend of a solid action game with the creativity of the brush. You could use a few different weapons, but the key was to use your brush to exploit an enemy's weakness, like drawing a bomb to blow a big guy up or a lightning bolt to zap a flying enemy. And the game just had so much heart. The characters were memorable, the story was beautiful, and the music was just incredible. It was a game that looked like a classic piece of art, but played like a fantastic modern action-adventure game. It's one of those games that proves that you don't need photorealistic graphics to be a timeless classic. It's a beautiful, innovative, and unforgettable experience on the PS2, and a must-play for anyone who wants to see what a game can be when it has a true artistic vision. Shadow of the Colossus. Shadow of the Colossus is one of those games that just stands on its own. It's a game with a single focus, and it does that one thing perfectly. You play as a guy named Wander, and all you have to do is find and defeat 16 enormous, majestic creatures called the Colossi. That's the whole game. There are no side quests, no towns to visit, just a massive, beautiful, and lonely world and your quest. It's an unforgettable experience. The world itself is called the Forbidden Lands, and it's just something else. It feels ancient and forgotten. You'll ride your horse, aggro, for miles across these vast plains, through canyons and over cliffs, and the whole time you feel this sense of isolation. The game uses its huge scale to make you feel tiny and insignificant, which just adds to the atmosphere. You'll stumble across old ruins, massive waterfalls, and stunning vistas, and it really feels like you're on a grand, lonely journey. The fact that the PS2 could render a world so big and seamless with no real loading screens was a huge accomplishment for the time. And the Colossi, man, they are the best part. They're not just bosses you fight, they're living, breathing puzzles. Every one of them is different and majestic. Some are like peaceful, rock-covered giants, and others are aggressive flying beasts. Your job is to figure out how to climb them. You'll grab onto their fur, their stone bodies, or their wings, and you have to hold on as they shake and try to knock you off. The sense of scale is just incredible. You're this tiny speck clinging to the back of a giant, and you can feel your controller rumble as they move. It's this epic, acrobatic struggle that's equal parts puzzle and combat, and when you finally take one down, there's this sadness to it. The game makes you feel a little guilty for what you've done, and it gives the whole quest this tragic, emotional weight that's so rare to find in games. The animation was so good on the PS2 too. You could feel the weight of every jump and every move, and the way the Colossi moved was just so fluid and believable. It was an absolute masterpiece that showed what a game could be if it had a strong vision and a ton of heart. Yakuza II. The PS2 was pushed to its absolute limits to bring this thing to life, and the result was one of the most immersive and packed open worlds on the console. You weren't just running through some generic city, you were in these two incredible living places. The first city, Kamurocho, felt like a home for anyone who played the first game. The moment you step into Theater Square with the giant Millennium Tower looming over you, you feel that energy. The streets are just packed with people, all of them walking around, and the whole place is lit up with these insane neon signs. Every alleyway feels like a new discovery, and you can just stumble into a street fight or a random side quest at any moment. And then the game takes you to a completely different city, Sotenbori, and it's just as alive, but has a totally different vibe. You've got the huge, iconic Glico-like sign over the canal, and the streets feel louder and even more energetic. The fact that the game could handle two distinct and incredibly detailed cities with so much going on in them was a serious technical achievement. The feeling of these cities being packed isn't just about the number of people either. It's about how every corner feels like it has a purpose. You can go into countless restaurants to grab a bite to eat and boost your health, which makes the world feel more than just a backdrop. There are convenience stores, arcades, and a bunch of other places you can interact with, and the game is constantly throwing stuff at you. You'll be walking down the street and some random gang will try to start a fight, and then right after, someone will call out to you to help with some wild side story. It feels like a real place, you know? It's not an empty sandbox. It's a place that's constantly offering you things to do and people to meet, and that's what makes the entire experience so unforgettable. The developers made a world that was as much a character as Kiryu himself, and it's a huge part of why the game is an all-time classic. The Simpsons Hit and Run. This game was an absolute gem. It's one of the best examples of a licensed game done right, and for a lot of people, it was their first real experience with an open world game. It took the whole Grand Theft Auto formula and basically just put it in the world of The Simpsons, and it was a perfect fit. The open world of Springfield was a huge part of the game's magic. The moment you start playing, you feel like you're actually in the show. All the iconic landmarks are there, the Simpsons house, the Quickie Mart, the power plant, Moe's Tavern, and just about every other place you can think of. It was a thrill for any fan of the series to finally get to explore these places. The whole game just looks and feels like a long episode of the show. The humor is spot on, with tons of funny dialogue, silly character animations, and a totally absurd plot involving aliens and a weird soda conspiracy.
She needs to talk to you at home before you go to work.
The gameplay was a ton of fun too. The driving was a huge part of it, and it was pure arcade chaos. You could drive as all these different characters and their iconic vehicles, and the driving felt fast and loose, perfect for racing and causing mayhem. The hit and run system was a great non-violent take on the wanted level. If you hit too many things or ran people over, a little meter would fill up, and then you'd be chased by police or other angry characters. It was a great way to add consequences without getting too dark. On foot, the game had simple but fun platforming and combat. The missions were all crazy and creative, just like a cartoon would be, and the game was full of a ton of little things to find and collect that made it feel packed with content. For the PS2, it was a solid technical achievement that gave us a seamless open-world version of Springfield. The game proved that if you blend a popular license with a good core gameplay loop, you can make something that's not just a good licensed game, but a great game, period. It's an unforgettable classic that still holds up. Jak II. This game was just a huge, shocking turn for a lot of people who played the first one. The first Jak and Daxter was this bright, colorful, happy platformer, and then this game came out and it was a completely different animal. It was a dark, gritty, and surprisingly mature open-world adventure. It was a risky move, but man, it paid off. The world of Haven City was just incredible for the PS2. It was this huge, oppressive, futuristic metropolis with flying vehicles buzzing everywhere. The atmosphere was so much darker than the first game. You always felt like you were in danger, with the city's guards, the Crimson Guard, constantly patrolling the streets and the rooftops. It was a core part of the experience to constantly be on the run from them, and that tension made the game so much more compelling. For a PS2 game, the fact that they created a city of that size with all of its seamless moving traffic and action was a huge technical accomplishment. There was no loading when you entered a building, and the transitions from on-foot combat to driving a vehicle were just perfect. The gameplay changed completely too. Jak went from a silent hero to a talking, angry protagonist, and he had a full arsenal of guns to go with it. The combat was a really satisfying mix of the platforming from the first game and a new third-person shooting mechanic. You could run around on foot, jumping and shooting, and then you could steal a flying vehicle to get around the city. But the coolest thing was the dark eco transformation. When you filled up a special meter, Jak could turn into this powerful, destructive form with a completely different set of abilities. It was a great way to handle the tough battles and just cause some satisfying chaos. The story was much more serious and emotional than the first one, and it really gave the game a sense of purpose and a ton of heart. Jak II was a game that dared to evolve, and it proved that a beloved series could completely change its genre and still deliver a masterpiece. It's a true classic and a testament to how far a game could push the PS2.